Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is Bobby Hughes, the Executive Director with the Eastern Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation, and I'd like to welcome you to our Abandoned Mine Reclamation Chronicles, which is a one-of-a-kind podcast that converses with passionate community leaders and community partners, and we like to highlight outstanding reclamation and community cleanup efforts, showcase stream improvement successes, and share different types of emergent ideas and technologies to reclaim and remediate our legacy abandoned mine lands. And I'm your host, Bobby Hughes, with EPCAMER, and I'm joined here today by Ann Damit, our watershed coordinator of the Western Pennsylvania Coalition for Abandoned Mine Reclamation. And we have with us here Ed Wytovich, former and founding member of EPCAMER and past president, as well as member of the Catawissa Creek Restoration Association. So Ann and Ed, welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. First, we do like to start out by thanking the Foundation for Pennsylvania Watersheds for underwriting the first 12 episodes of our Abandoned Mine Reclamation Chronicles podcast. And I think we're about 7-8 episodes in now and having a really good time. So yeah, thank you to the Foundation for Pennsylvania Watersheds for partnering in this endeavor. All the previous episodes are archived at the EPCAMER and WIPCAMER's YouTube channels. So you can go back and see our previous episodes. And we're hopeful that this live streaming kind of platform of personal interviews and discussing timely topics related to abandoned mine reclamation will engage our audiences at a whole new level. If you're joining us live, you can type your questions and comments for Ed right into the comments box of wherever you're joining us from, Facebook or YouTube. We'll see those comments and be able to ask him questions live.
Good. And so I'll take a few minutes here just to give some background on Ed here, and we'll get into some questions about his past and his career and work in abandoned mine reclamation throughout the coal region here. So for the past 50 years or more here, Ed has been volunteering in land and water conservation projects in the anthracite region of northeastern Pennsylvania. And Ed's first project involved work with the conservation district back in, I think, 1992, and he'll probably talk about that relationship in a little bit here. And there was a student project, I believe, at Williams Valley High School, and where he had taught environmental science at the time, and developed a community partnership to treat some mine drainage down in the Wytovich Creek watershed. And there had been an earlier community organization down there called the Wytovich Creek Restoration Association that right now is it's a dissolved organization, but there are still some folks down there keeping an eye on the watershed and many of the tributaries to the Wytovich. But that was just one of many watershed associations and organizations, I think around 10 of them, that he had a hand in starting and building some capacity within the communities in the coal fields, pretty much in the southern anthracite and western middle region of northeastern PA. He's a founding member of EPCAMER, past president, longtime mentor of myself and my coworker Mike and our staff here. And he was also an active member at the time of the Wytovich Creek group. And he was an 8th grade science teacher at Upper Dauphin area school district as well when I was doing some work with him early in my career. And also spent time at Williams Valley High School. I guess it was the high school. He taught 8th grade science and general science for the VOTEC, business and general students at the school there. And his favorite subjects to teach at the time was environmental science. And I think that's how we'll hear that he got involved with conservation districts through some of his student projects. So welcome, Ed, to the show. It's glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome, Ed. It's such a pleasure to get to know you a little bit better. And we'd like actually our anybody who's viewing to get to know you a little bit better too. So we always like to start our conversation on a little bit more of a personal level of your background so that everybody can get to know you as well as we do. And so first questions are kind of, where'd you grow up? Where are you currently from? Who's your family? Do you have any like historical connection to mining or abandoned mine reclamation? And sort of those questions. So we'll let you take it away.
All right. First of all, I hope we can all honor all of our troops that are over in Iran and that vicinity right now. I know I have a nephew that's stationed over there, and pray for them and all the people who are trying to get out. And I guess the flag behind me is appropriate for that.
Mhm.
Where
Yeah.
did I grew up in Schuylkill County, a little town called Port Carbon. And Port Carbon got its name from large shipments of coal by water. At least that's what the sign says. And that was the headwaters point of the Schuylkill Canal. Didn't never realized when I was a kid that all of the walls along the stream going through Port Carbon were walls from the canal, and they're still up today. So I spent a lot of time outside, I guess, as a kid. We were fortunate that we were allowed to go and do things at an early age without supervision. I guess it was frightening for my mother at times. I know it was. But I guess the first thing I remember was going picking wild mushrooms and berries with my dad and grandfather. And I was probably only 5 or so at that time starting out. I still go out and pick a little bit now and then. When I was in second grade, a friend of mine and I wanted to camp out. And so my dad and his dad took us out. This was just a day event to a little place that was called Priestie's Dam. It was called that because a priest had built it back in the 1930s. And it got washed out in a flood in 1936. And so there we were, little kids, and I don't know what we did out there. I don't remember much, but we talked about, wouldn't it be neat if they could rebuild that dam so we'd have a place to go fishing? And my dad and Charlie's dad thought it was a pretty good idea. And next thing you know, they formed an association and got help from the Army Reserve Center, who was a engineering battalion, and they rebuilt the dam. And that was, if I want to say that's my first project when I was 6 or 7 years old, maybe it was. I started working and helping out on Christmas tree farms when I was 8 years old, so I was outside a lot of time. I still do that in the winter. My cousins have a tree farm, and I have the looks for it, so it helps with selling trees, I guess. I guess the first good memory about thinking about the stream is the story I tell. A couple of my buddies and I were playing along the Schuylkill River. Our parents never had to tell us not to get in the river because it smelled foul, it looked foul, it turned different colors at different times depending on what was being discharged. And we used it for target practice for throwing rocks or shooting with our BB guns at targets floating down the river because it was also an open dump. And there were no sewage treatment plants along that whole section of river. So it was a flowing sewer and dump and full of mine discharges and silt and everything else. And we took advantage of all the bottles and TV tubes and stuff that came floating down the river and shot at them. But my one friend, Ronnie, looked down the creek one day. We were probably in our early teens. And he said, "Look at that hole down there. Wouldn't it be nice if they fixed that up someday and we could go fishing there in about 30 years or so?" And we all said, "Yeah, that was a great idea." But the story always stuck with me. And little did I know that maybe 40 years later, I would become they. And we started on that journey. I graduated Penn State in 1974, degree in ag education, and was certified both in ag and general science. That's how I ended up being a science teacher. I actually started teaching in 72 at a vocational school and finished up my degree while I was teaching. and left the boat tech school and went out to work in industry for the next 12, 14 years, something like that. And decided if I wanted to have a pension, I was already in my mid-30s, it was time to get back to education and put some money away. So having kids and stuff like that. So that's what happened. And I started the whole route with substitute teaching. And I applied at Williams Valley to be a substitute on a Friday afternoon. And that weekend, I got called and asked to come in on Monday. And I became an accidental science teacher because the teacher that went out had an accident on his way home from work and decided he was going to retire after that. So that's how I ended up teaching at Williams Valley. And I ended up teaching environmental science because the first meeting we had with the science department deciding on who was going to teach what the following year, they wanted somebody to teach environmental science, and I volunteered to do it, and nobody else wanted to do it. I thought it was great. So that's how I got into working with environmental science there. As far as my first project, that would be in the mid-70s. My father-in-law was in the coal business, and part of what he was doing was reclaiming alluvial coal. That's coal dirt that washed down the streams because the breakers in the old days just discharged the waste material right into the creeks, and it went away. And one of the places we owned was away, and there it was, several feet deep of fine silt, which there was a market for at the time. So after they got the coal out, it had to be reclaimed, and because of my ag background, I volunteered, and we got some kids to help out and planted thousands and thousands of trees in an area that my wife and I now own, and we call it the swamp. And it's well spoken, and we still do some work down there and try to keep things up to grade. The trees that we planted that were seedlings 8 inches to maybe a foot high are now 50 feet or more high. And it makes you wonder, where'd all the time go? So that's what happened there. As far as the teaching and the students at Williams Valley, these are the kids that like to do things and are not academically inclined. It doesn't mean they're less intelligent. It means that they like to get things done. And some of the most brilliant people I've ever known were people like that, whether they were plumbers or carpenters or machinists or whatever. And so I, having taught in a Votech school for a couple of years, I thought maybe we'd get project oriented. And so the kids started doing stuff like recycling, both aluminum and plastic, and looking at the mine water. A lot of them never knew about the mine water or never even seen it because it's kind of hidden in a lot of places by the overgrowth of shrubbery. And why aren't there fish in this stream, even though it's clear? And some of these things led to another. And student projects, I decided, because it was a semester course, became live projects that we passed on from year to year to different groups to their finality. One was to treat a mine discharge and build a diversion system. And how are we going to do that? And so some of the kids saw one down on Stony Creek that was put in by the Doc Fritchie chapter of Trout Unlimited. And the guy who was really in head of it, Shag Schwalm, that was his project. Shag was from the Williams Valley area, and we all got to know him and decided to put one in on this discharge. And finally, we got through. We received a small grant, and I guess the grant came through the Conservation District. And with the help of guys from the township and Lions Club and just general volunteers and donations from places, we got this thing put in, and it worked. but at the time didn't know that the mine discharge was that bad that we should have had at least 6 of them to do what we wanted it to do. But it was a start, and it got people interested. Some of my kids made presentations at the Lions Club, for example, a slideshow, and went out and explored. I had other kids that took canoe trips and filmed going down through the Great Tower City Swamp, which is a couple hundred acres of wonderful wetlands. And they'd never been there. Didn't realize what was in their backyard. It was a way to open people's eyes. And even though it was back in the 1980s and 90s, I still have kids contact me on occasion. Last year in April, one of the fellows that I had in class called me up and he said, "Remember me?" And we went through all of that stuff. And he said, "They're going to have a fishing derby down in Williamstown. And could I come down? It's going to be on April 26th. And I couldn't do it because that was my wife and I, it was our 50th anniversary. And if I did it then, I thought I would get shot. So I wasn't able to do that. But that's the kind of thing, it was, here it is almost 40 years since I had him in class, and those kids still remember and still reach out at times. I went to Upper Dauphin in 2000, and there we started a club for environmental science. I was teaching 8th grade general science, and we got the idea to have not only recycling in the school, which we started, and that stayed until I retired, but also started something called Watershed Awareness Month, and we shot for the month of May. And so how do we do it? We had no idea what we were doing. But with working with the Susquehanna River Basin Commission, they were able to print out a large map for me of the Wiconisco Valley, for the whole Wiconisco Creek and the drainage, and put the lines of elevation on it. We had a couple copies of it. We laminated one and cut out every 10-foot elevation level until we had them all put together. And then we put that on poster board and glued the whole thing together so that we had a 3D model of the whole Wiconisco Valley from its headwaters down to the Susquehanna River. And we also got in touch with other people. Ann Devine was a big help. Ann and I were co-partners on putting this together. And we ended up down at the Capitol with the governor and a whole bunch of other people. And Dave Hess, who was Secretary of DEP at the time. And the kids even wrote a song based on "This Land Is Your Land," but changed it to "This Land Is Pennsylvania," etc. And we all sang that. We had printed copies, and the governor joined in and everything. It was a wonderful thing. There's a nun out in the Erie area, and I'm sorry, but I've forgotten her name, but she brought a busload of her kids down. And so we had other kids there, not just our kids from Upper Dauphin, and it was a great day. And we did that for a couple of years until, because of a change of things at the school, they did away with clubs. And so I no longer had an environmental club. I couldn't keep up with that. But anyway, that's how all of that kind of works. So that's me. As far as getting involved with conservation districts and all, when we put in the diversion well, we managed to receive a small grant through Schuylkill County. I think it was a SKIP program, and we got in touch with the conservation district and Craig Morgan, and that's how that relationship began. And we had the Air Force engineers, Red Horse Battalion from Fort Indiantown Gap, which is just a reserve thing, actually put it in for us, which was neat. And we had a lot of people there, and we got it to work. From there, one of my kids' projects was to go out and make presentations about the Wiconisco Creek and form the Watershed Association. So they did a presentation at the Lions Club, and enough people there said, yep, let's do this. And we got together, and the kids actually chaired the first meeting at the high school. And the association took off from there. Sad to say, it's no longer in existence because it couldn't keep the membership up, which is something that I think all watershed groups are having a problem with. So I'll leave it at that for right now.
Yeah, and I was wondering, do you remember when I think of the swamps? There used to be like two swamps that we were familiar with. You had the one that you were talking about in Tower City, the Tower City swamp. I believe that was around Wytovich's farm, possibly, if I'm remembering correctly.
Upstream from Wytovich's, yeah.
Yeah, and then the other one was the swamp that is along the Mahanoy Creek, which also is something you're real familiar with.
Well, that's the one that my wife and I still own the property. Yeah.
Right. And I can recall back when we first started Epcammer that actually I think my first day of work, you guys had put together an effort where I had to coordinate the I think it was Fort Indian Town Gap. They were on reserve, and we had, I can't even tell you how many tons, if you could even recall how many flatbed trailers that we coordinated down there of limestone sand to bring them into the Wiconisco, and we were replacing sand at each of the various bridge locations up and down on that day. I think it happened to be May 7th of 1996 or 97, if I can recall correctly. But that was an exciting day. Do you remember that?
I'm going to correct you. That was on the Catawissa Creek.
Oh, that was on Catawissa.
Yeah, that was on Catawissa Creek. Wiconisco Creek also did limestone sand dosing, and they did it until it folded. Membership was getting up. The guys that were left were in their 80s, and they were still going out and shoveling sand into the creek in the different locations that had been picked, and just couldn't keep up with it anymore and couldn't find anybody to take over. So that's what happened. Sadly to say, that's what happened with that group.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you, just like, as we were talking about your career and your bio in the beginning here, I mean, you've been involved so long in the restoration efforts of both nonprofits and the conservation districts here for well over 5 decades. In your opinion, do you think that how have they evolved, or should they evolve, since you've become involved in this effort? Is there some ideas that you think that they should be looking at today in these communities that would help them, sort of advance the cause for clean water in their communities? Or, you're talking about just the aging out of many of the groups that they just could no longer do the work. And I think we've seen this over at least the last 30. You're seeing it over the last 50. But, what do you think should be some next steps for these groups?
I'm going to back up a little bit. When we first started a lot of these groups, we did a lot of water quality monitoring and came up with small projects that groups could do, like installing a diversion well and maintaining it. And that was hands-on, and people could see results and felt very happy about it. Right now, the projects, at least in the anthracite region, have gotten so big that it's really hard to get individuals out to be able to do anything. They become government projects or industrial sized projects. We just don't have many, if any, of the small ones left. So we get involved, as you well know, with cleanups and things like that, and meetings, and try to move forward. And I think one of the things I think we have to do is publicize to groups again, local groups, to get out to see your Lions Club, JCs, and American Legion, anybody else that'll have you, as well as school districts, and go in and talk to them and see if you can get some people interested. When people get out of high school and get in their 20s, they're building their lives and their careers in their 20s and 30s and into their 40s, and with kids and families and everything else going on, they don't have the extra time that's required. Our youth does, and people who are the retirement age does. So I think that's kind of where we've got to focus our efforts, but we can find a lot of those people in local groups, like I said, whether it be Lions, JCs, what have you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ed, for obviously all the years you've spent with nonprofits. We have so much to learn from you, and you're exactly right. We're probably not doing a good enough job getting our young people interested in this, getting out there and volunteering at these things.
I think one of the things, we have to find some way to have hands-on projects that people can see results, besides just meetings and trying to raise some funds to do things. I think that's really necessary, and I'm not sure what to do anymore. Cleanups is one thing, but I'll be honest with you, I don't like to clean up after somebody else's trash that they just miscreants threw it all around. That's nonsense, but I'm afraid we have to do that.
Yeah.
Well,
Excellent point.
And I was going to say, I think that's a direction we're trying to go with a lot of the new funding that's available, and the way that the state, in particular, the Bureau of Abandoned Mine Reclamation, is starting to approach projects. They're looking at a development plan before they go to, design, permitted, and construction. And so they want to phase it. And what we're finding is that in the first phase of development, that's where all the data collection has to happen. That's where all the monitoring has to take place, and to set up some of the stations that, need to have equipment in the field. And that's where I think we can direct some attention, if they would fund those efforts, to make sure that we get enough places out there that we can monitor in real time, more accurately, and get the youth involved to, help get to some of these places that, where some of us are getting a little old to be climbing the sides of mountains, but we're still trying. But if the youth got involved with some of that data collection and installation, it could help us obtain the information we need to move to the next level of, treatment options and, scalability of some of the systems that might need to be built down the road. But for sure, we're not doing as much of that as we could, and it's not being funded as heavily as it used to be 20, 30 years ago when we first started with a lot of the watershed groups. That was their role. They were monitoring. There was senior volunteer programs, doing the same thing like we had in Schuylkill County. But that needs to be sort of reinvigorated if we can get the funding to do more of that work.
Ed, could you, we probably already touched on some of this, but we'd like you to share a little bit of the history of Catawissa Creek Restoration Association. Why were they formed, and what types of projects did they do throughout the years, and where do you think they're headed into the future?
We started in 1996, I believe, with a couple of meetings with people from primarily the Columbia County Conservation District, and some others that were local, to see what we could do and how we should form it. We probably had about 3 meetings before we had a general public meeting, and we held that in Schuylkill County in the Ringtown Fire Company. And about 150 people showed up, and because they were interested in getting something done. And I think one of the big parts of being a watershed association is to show people that things can change, that they can make it better. I had somebody say to me, "Why are you doing this? Once an S Creek, always an S Creek, and you can fill out the rest of the S yourselves." And
Sulfur.
Because it's not. And well, we had the Black Creek, the Sulphur Creek, and the S Creek. So because we didn't have any sewage plants back then. So at any rate, that's where that comes from. And as far as getting the people out and monitoring and all, a lot of that was real easy with the simple way that we monitored back then with like a hawk kit and stuff, and you took some samples. And it's gotten so technologically advanced that we have to really spend more time training people in order to be able to monitor and put the gauges in and the other devices that now go in streams, and then you have to download these stuff, and that's all different than getting the instantaneous results. But some of what we did in the past still works, but it gives you an idea where you got to go with the really good instrumentation today.
Yeah, Ed, I was wondering, Ed, like, like when you were teaching both at Williams Valley, I think early on in your career, and even with Mayan, my former supervisor and probably one of your really good friends, Craig Morgan, at the Conservation District, who was really
Right.
like an early mentor, even in my career. And do you still maintain some relationships or communications with some of our old friends down there in the county? And have you touched base with them just to see what they're up to today, or no?
Yeah, a little bit. Just about all of them are retired,
I know.
Dan Corey at DEP retired last year, and some of them have passed away, like Dave Durbus, who was instrumental in starting the Schuylkill Headwaters Association, and some were just getting older, up in their 80s and approaching their 90s. So, yeah, a little bit, but not as much as I probably would like to. But yeah, we stay in touch. It's the same way with students. All of a sudden, you haven't heard from somebody in 40 years, and they contact you. I'm on LinkedIn, and some of my kids from Upper Dauphin, must be about 20 of them. We still get back and forth a little bit on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I know that feeling because I have some work study students that have been at programs of ours, that we've done probably 25 years ago, and they said I was 10 years old doing a tie-dye T-shirt with you at a program,
Wow.
and now they're in their 20s, early 20s, and they're working for us. So that's great, but it also it starts to document time pretty quickly on how far and how long we've been in the game. So, and it's great to see and hear when you do hear back from those former students and someone that you've made an impact on. And surely you've made an impact on many students, as well as staff here and others you've come in contact with over the years. So I know it's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
I had one memory I wanted to see if you recalled. It was kind of fun. Do you remember the Schuylkill River walk that was from back in, I think,
1998?
Yeah, and we were walking various segments of the trails and the railroad grades along different branches of the Schuylkill River to raise awareness for the work that so many of us were doing in the Schuylkill River. And I recall stopping off in Middleport. I think we started in Tamaqua, possibly at the Newkirk Tunnel, and worked our way along the Schuylkill River Trail, and walked our way into Middleport along 209, and then we met with some church ladies that were at a church in Middleport that were making pierogies, and we stopped there, ate a few pierogies, watched them pinch a bunch of pierogies, and then we ate and continued our way down the valley towards Pottsville. Do you recall that? Do you remember doing that?
I would never forget that. There were 6 different stretches that we walked in the headwaters of the Schuylkill, from upper and northern Schuylkill County, eastern Schuylkill County, and down to its confluence with the Little Schuylkill in Port Clinton, which is at the southern border of Schuylkill County, not far from Cabela's store down there.
Yep.
Each segment, somebody said it all totaled up to a little over 120 miles when we put the 6 days together. So, and a lot of neat people joined us along the way. Going to Middleport was kind of special for me too. We Tony, oh gosh, I think his name was Rushin, who I'd known for years. He was uncle of one of my good buddies growing up. And anyway, Tony took us around town a little bit when we got there, and he's the one that took us to the church for the pierogi sale. It was the Polish National Church, and they were very good, and I ate too many. But I think we all did. And when you're walking that much, it's easy to work it off. I also remember going over to the baseball field where I'd played Legion baseball years ago, and Middleport became a very special place for all of us that were there. And when I still occasionally see some of the guys that we played with, we always have just fond memories of that. So that was a big part of it. That was the walk. We ended up in Cressona, I think, and along the way ran into one of my high school classmates that I played football with, and I walked along with Joey for a while, and that was great stuff. But we got a lot of interest from a lot of people, and I think that has helped the Headwaters a great deal, the Schuylkill Headwaters, and a fine organization doing some really, really good work. So, yeah, can't forget that. Wouldn't be able to do it again. I wish I could.
Yeah. Let's do a little bit more reminiscing. Can you tell us about some of the abandoned mine reclamation projects that you've been in throughout the years, and what lessons you've learned along the way? Maybe what challenges did you face? What made you successful, or made your projects successful?
Being naive was a big help.
Yeah.
Really, because if you don't know what you can't do, there's a good chance you can do it. That's how I looked at it. And a good way to think of how we got some things done is, they say, you can't do that. Well, we did, not knowing that we could. The swamp, for example, the planting that we did back in the 70s was very successful. It was pretty much a monoculture because it was all evergreens, which was the way to do it back then. That was the way you reclaim things. And we've been gradually getting rid of some of the trees. And there is one big section of 10 or 15 acres left. All told, there was about 40 acres we planted there. And it's really neat, but taking it down, we've let natural diversity take over, and I think it's just getting finer all the time. Although a lot of people like to walk through the section that's big pine forest and it's open underneath and it's like a park, but there's not much diversity there, which I'd like to see. But that's neither here nor there. We put in 3 settling ponds to take some of the water from the Monterey Creek, put it through the ponds, settle the stuff out of it, and discharge it, and it worked beautifully. But what we didn't realize was the amount of suspended solids in the Monterey Creek. And the first segment filled up within a year with stuff. And the next segment didn't take too much longer. And aerial pictures we saw of it, it started out as orange as Bobby's shirt. The next section was a lot cleaner, and the final section was crystal clear. It was working. We knew that part worked, but didn't realize that we needed a lot more study and knowledge about what happens with the water and how much stuff is in it as far as suspended solids without getting into dissolved solids, the iron, aluminum, manganese, and all that other stuff. So that was a big eye opener. It still works. It's a wetlands now, and it works really well. So it wasn't a loss. It was a great addition, as well as a lesson for us. And it's used by a lot of different animals. So I think it's still pretty neat. Doing the Oneida #1 project, getting all the people together from the different agencies to get the funding, working with the conservation districts of both Schuylkill and Columbia County, because it was right on the county line. Department of Agriculture, we got some of the money for. I think we were the last people to get a grant to do work like this from Department of Agriculture, and I don't know how we did that. I have to ask Craig or Bobby. They had something to do with that. And the engineer who designed it was with the NRCS in Columbia County, and he had never worked with mine water before. This was his first and only project, and it came online in 2001, and it still works today, which is amazing for a passive system. We do have to do occasional clean outs and back flush to get leaves out of the system, like anybody else. But other than that, it's still functioning. It's still treating about just as much water as it did before. And the chemistry of the discharge water is pretty much the same. And we tickle pink that it still works. I think part of the reason it works was accidental, because it was in the middle of a development right below one dam, and there was another dam just below the project. We felt it necessary to cover the project with geotextile and plant on top of it, which was done. And Bob Hedden and I talked one time. Bob Hedden was, he's the godfather, the guru of AMD treatment. And he asked me, why is it still working? And I said, the only thing I can think of is that because it's covered, it's trapping carbon dioxide, and that's keeping everything dissolved. And he said, oh, yeah. I said, well, but like I said, that was an accident. Serendipity. It was a lucky accident and a good one, and it still works. So we're still working that project. The other projects, we had sand dosing on the Catawissa, which Bob mentioned earlier, and we had National Guard from Williamstown bring their trailers up and haul sand in, and they loved it because that gave them something to do that had meaning. The township where we were putting the sand in was very helpful and agreeable, and they had their equipment and manpower out putting the sand from the bridges into the stream in different locations. And the sand was pretty inexpensive, so I don't think we paid a ton. It wasn't a whole lot. And everything worked. We could afford to do it. And then Desert Storm happened and the war in Iraq. And when that happened, the National Guard wasn't allowed to do any projects like that anymore. So that's where that went, and we couldn't afford the trucking and shipping to put that in. We did put a really big project in on the Audenried discharge. For those of you in Western Pennsylvania might be seeing this, our discharges may not have as much metals and may not be quite as acidic as they are in the western part of the state, but our volumes are much higher. Audenried discharge is about 9,000 gallons a minute, maybe more on average. And so that's what we had to treat. And we put a treatment system in with 3 large tanks that were originally designed as manure storage tanks, believe it or not. They were 120 feet in diameter and 12 feet deep. And we put a system underneath them where we could bring the water in and put it in different parts of it. And the water would go up through limestone. We put about 18 or 19,000 tons of limestone total in the 3 tanks. And then once a week, they had to get flushed. And it worked pretty well. And then we had a dedication in, I think it was 2006 in June. And we had a lot of people showed up, and Secretary Hess was there, and people from the county governments from all sides were there, and a lot of just regular people we invited in and had buses transporting them in, tents up, and within 10 days, we had a major tropical storm come up and cause flooding, caused the mine to blow out, and pretty much destroyed the system. So it all had to be taken apart and put back together again. And the hole where the discharge was had actually moved back into the mountain about 75 feet and taken all of the soils that was above it, and that got flushed down the stream. I happened to be there the day that it happened. I got there after it had blown out. The noise was incredible from the roar of the water and the boulders going down. I have pictures of the original opening, and there's steel beams there, and we never found the steel beams. Where they got washed to and covered up, we have no idea, but gone. And they were pretty big beams. So water is really powerful. What we think happened is there was a collapse inside the ordinary tunnel, and water pressure built up behind it because it's about 550 feet to the surface. And that's like the pressure at the bottom of the Hoover Dam. And that's what blew it out. And it happened a second time after that in 2011. And that project hasn't worked since then. Now the state and Bureau of Abandoned Mine Reclamation has a project, and Auden Reed is on the drawing boards. They're doing work with it now. They're about to put a new access road in, and I just got an email yesterday inviting me to go along with a tour later this month to go back down in and see how things are going and how they're going to engineer the system. So I'm personally excited about that. Having a system like that fail is that was on me. I was the one that put the proposal together, and you got to live with that. But we learned an awful lot from it, that the water can be treated and can come out better. And hopefully the new treatment system that they design will be able to use the tanks that are there. So that's what we're at there.
Yeah, so I'm just sort of thinking here, Ed, now that that work is going to continue to be underway by the state, with some of that federal, probably IIJA money from the Investment Act that could put money into the watershed. There's a efficient access program and project in the works too, to start looking at the downstream areas. Potentially that could be opened up maybe with some positive working relationships with private landowners. And if this water is to get cleaned up, there's that potential for pretty much 42 miles to be restored. Where are we at now, do you think, in looking forward? Is that where you're spending a lot more of your time in your retirement, so-called, devoting some time towards that effort in reaching out to landowners and our partnerships with the Fish and Boat and other private landowners? Is that where you're going to be spending a little bit more of your retirement time here today? It seems to be you're working quite a bit.
Well, we sent in a watershed group time. I think we should back up a little. You're right. The stream's about 42 miles long. Its largest tributary is the Tom Hicken Creek. That adds probably another 10 miles. And we do have two projects on the Tom Hicken. Oneida 1, which we discussed earlier, and Oneida number 2, which is in the process of being expanded. And the results of those two systems is that whole stream now holds trout. The sad part is last year there was a discharge of some sort that we had a big fish kill on it. We don't know where it came from, and we've had the Fish Commission look at it. Fish are coming back, but that's the kind of things you hope to never see. The Catawissa Creek, the only public land along it is the headwaters area, because DCNR just purchased about 5,500 acres there for an outdoor recreation area and off-road riding park to be part of it. There was once a company there called Paragon, which had rides and where people could take their quads and jeeps, motorcycles, and bicycles and travel around. And it was a very well-run outfit. And some Saturdays I'd be up there turning valves to flush the system at Auden Reed, and people would come down and want to know what was going on, how it worked, and it turned out to be a really great educational opportunity. And we got some help that way. I mean, turning all those valves was getting old at that time. So that worked really well. But as far as access, we wanted to get ahead of the curve for when the stream Audenried project does come on. Approximately 80% of the acid load in the Catawissa Creek comes out of the Audenried discharge. Once that's done, it's going to be just a beautiful, amazing stream. It is beautiful and amazing right now, but it's even going to get better. And all the land below the Audenried discharge is private. And so there isn't any public access unless somebody who owns the property along it allows you in to fish or to kayak or bird watch or whatever else you might want to do, even monitor. And so we started an access program to learn about what we can do to contact landowners who might be interested and take the steps with the Fish and Boat Commission to put this into play. And also we've been collecting some money and so that we have something to donate and back this whole thing up, because it involves not only paying for easement rights for that length of stream, but also to put in a parking area, and that has to be engineered and designed. And we envision restricting the amount of people that are able to come in and access it by restricting the amount of parking that we have available. It's a simple way, and we look at having the stream open just from the opening day of trout season until the closing of the regular day of trout season on August 31st, so that having fishermen in wouldn't impact people who are hunting or doing other sports at that time. So, and to hopefully make the landowners happier. That's part of our idea, and we're still working on that. And I understand you're working on the same sort of thing out there. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your project.
Well, yeah, I volunteer for Blacklegs Trout Nursery, and they're a cooperative Fish and Boat Commission trout nursery that raises about 15,000 trout annually since 1986. And they're stocking their fish along the main stem of Blacklegs Creek in Indiana County, and dealing with landowner access or fishing access with the landowners is, just a perpetual thing. Landowners change, they change their mind. New roads are built. We actually had a situation where the railroad constructed a new spur that took away a bunch of access. So it's a constant thing. So, and keeping your landowners happy is a thing too. Just keeping the trash picked up after people, because most of the time fishermen are good. They're taking their trash with them, but there are definitely instances where we've had to go in and clean up after people. And so I can learn a lot from what you're saying there, how you limit access by just making your parking lot a little bit smaller. We've also tried just making some of our access points as either ADA accessible, for handicapped access, or children only, youth only. We've done that. And that helps too. So yeah, it's good to hear that other groups are thinking along these lines, because, as our population increases, grows bigger and bigger and bigger, it does seem like there are less people out there fishing, but at the same time, we have a higher population, so more different people are wanting to fish. So it's something that we do have to consider. And when you put millions of dollars, into your watershed, cleaning up your watershed, building treatment systems, and raising trout to put back into the waters, it's something that you want to protect and perpetuate, because you've got such a large capital invested.
For sure.
yeah, so I'm interested to see, how you guys progress at that. And, I think I know that there are groups already kind of sharing their concerns and successes and whatever, kind of sharing them at a regional level, but statewide, I think we need to start talking about these issues.
I agree. One concern is that there are some commercial ventures coming up in the different places on different streams, not in the Catawissa yet that I know of, that are leasing large parts of the stream so they can guide fishermen. And then the public can't get into it.
Yeah.
That's an issue, and that's kind of why I wanted to get ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Yeah, this topic could be a good topic for the statewide conference on abandoned mine reclamation later in the fall here. That is going to be back home in our region here in the anthracite in September, that we'll be talking about more as we solidify some of the details. But I think that would be a great potential topic for discussion maybe at our conference that we could bring up to our conference planning committee to see what folks are doing across the state, and in partnership with the fishing boat and maybe these local trout nurseries and or just private landowners to talk about these type of access issues and ways to make sure that we're keeping the properties cleaned up and they're taking out what they take in and leaving no trace behind. All those kinds of things we want to instill in both the youth and adults alike, so that we keep our trails clean and we keep the access to rivers and streams clean for fishing. That'd be pretty important. So Ed, with just a few minutes left here, we like to close our episode maybe with a piece of advice for some of the community leaders to offer our watershed groups and their kind of capacity that they're looking to build for future sustainability. Do you have any kind of words of wisdom quickly here, and we'll close up the show and see what you got for everybody?
First, a comment about the access. One of our thoughts is perhaps getting scouting involved in Eagle Scout projects for helping to put some of the access stuff in. We'll have to. That's something, Ann, you can think about. It might be a good thing to go to, and we're hoping to be able to do some of that.
Yeah.
Jim Valvano, the old basketball coach who passed away, he said, "Don't give up. Don't ever give up." And I think that's a good place to start, and be patient, because these things take time. Good things come with time. Find ways to keep your people interested. Our Catawissa group, we were down to 2 active members until we started to talk about getting into this access, and our group is now back up to about 15 active, maybe 20. I don't remember the exact number. So having projects that are going to impact everybody, that's really great, and to get other people involved. We also got involved with Columbia County to have a watershed festival. We had probably an annual one for the last 4 years or so. That's going to go away, but what we're going to be able to do is do presentations at various local events, and that's what we're planning for now. So we'll see how that goes. Involve your community, involve the kids, get out and talk to people. Tell them these streams don't have to be this way, and we can fix them up, but we need your help. And talk to your politicians too. Take them for a tour if you can. That's a big help also. So I think that's about what I have to say about that.
Yeah, totally agree. So, thanks again, Ed, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure, and we're really thankful to have you as a friend and partner and longtime mentor of ours in abandoned mine reclamation. And so we encourage everybody to tune in on the first Friday of every month at noon for new episodes of the Abandoned Mine Reclamation Chronicles. And, we have some other interesting guests lined up. So if you want to mark your calendars for next month on Friday, April 3rd at noon, our interview is going to be with another good friend and colleague of all of ours, Kristen Riley, who is the executive director with the Choose Clean Water Coalition, who EPCAMR is a partner with, and many other groups in the Chesapeake Bay watershed are, as we fight for clean water in our legacy Abandoned Mine Reclamation Watersheds. So, Ann, with that, if you want to leave off.
Yeah, one last reminder that we still have sponsorship opportunities remaining to sponsor our podcast, and you can find those levels and information at the EPCAMR store. And let me see, I think we've got the link here. And so we'd be really happy to have a few more sponsors. And I think that's it.
Well, thank you, Ed. Thank you, Ann. And we hope everybody has a good weekend here. And let's all continue our fight for clean water.
Well, thank you, too.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Have a good day.
You too.